In at number 10, we have the Kronosaurus, and although maybe the tame method isn't somehow the most difficult, there are a lot of ways that this tame method can go wrong, which is why it's here, and there are also a lot of steps involved. So it does take a little bit of getting your head around to actually know how to tame this creature and also tame this thing successfully. As if it's in a blood rage, you shouldn't even attempt this. It's not going to work whatsoever. And obviously you need the adequate gear for this. Obviously you don't need any kind of train carriers or anything like that, but it takes quite a bit of energy to actually get this tame done, which is why it's on the list. But obviously once you tame this thing, you really do have an absolute beast of a creature, which is essentially just the Giga, but in every way that the Giga could be better, it is better. It doesn't have that rage meter anymore, it's got much better mobility and all of that. It really is a wonderful creature to use, and its tame method isn't too bad, and I know I'm putting it on the most difficult tames list. It can be quite easily achieved if you're well prepared, but this thing can also be quite difficult if you're not prepared, and also there are a lot of things which can go wrong, like it aggro into another creature and then you just ruin the whole tame. It can be really frustrating, so if you truly fully prepare for this thing, it will be a lot easier, but the thing is, it's quite hard to fully prepare for this thing and for it to go right 100% of the time. Next up, we have the Astrodelus, and this kind of had to be here. Like, maybe some people might say, well, this thing is a piece of cake. Well, there are a lot of things that can go wrong, especially considering the environment. Things can just go flying everywhere. These things can go running off and just run into a void worm and just get killed so easily. And again, it's not a matter of this tame method is extremely difficult. It's just a lot of things are likely to go wrong. And also it is quite an expensive one. Not too much for Gen 2 because element is absolutely everywhere. But I wouldn't say that it is an easy tame compared to a lot of other Ark creatures. This definitely is going to require some thought put into it and is going to pretty much require your full attention, whereas with a knockout tame you don't really need to do that. You just shoot something at something and when something's trapped, because you usually trap it, so it's like less effort on every front. You just trap it and it's easy, boom, done. Whereas especially with the biome of this thing, things really can go much further than you may expect, and unwanted trouble is very easily around the corner in the space biome on Gen 2, so that's always something to be particularly careful of. Next up, we have got the Blood Stalker, and this creature really does need to be here, in my opinion. Like, when you look at this creature and how it's tamed, the prep work that goes into it is actually kind of crazy. Like, the amount of blood bags you need to get, and I know with the Desmodus now it's a lot easier, but still, getting all those blood bags is quite a huge challenge, and then actually getting up to this thing, getting 100% effectiveness again, because you have to kind of feed this your own creatures, can be quite a big challenge, and that's obviously why I'm putting this thing on the list, as, you know, I think it's very deserving of it. But obviously once tamed, you got yourself, in my opinion, the best underwater creature which you could possibly get, and also a really great travelling mount, and it's essential on Gen 1 really, but on other maps it is an extremely useful one as well, which I think everyone should be taming, if obviously you have access to it. Otherwise I can't really say anything to that, can I? If you don't have the DLCs, then you can't really use it, but if you do, I would strongly recommend that you actually go out and get the effort, spend the effort, not get the effort. It's not like you go to the store and buy effort or something like that. Maybe just use hexagons and the effort's done for you. You can't buy blood bags with hexagons. Either way, yeah, go out there and get all those blood bags and tame yourself a blood stalker, and you will not regret it. Next up, we have the Basilisk, and this also has to be here, and I guess you can kind of put any tame that requires an egg to raise sort of in this position, as well, as it can be quite difficult in some cases, especially with the wyverns. Actually retrieving that egg is a lot harder than raising it, although I'm not really going to include them on the list. But if you wanted to say that wyverns deserved this list, well, I'm going to give them a brief mention here, and that is now all the segment that they're going to get, because I'm going to talk about the Basilisk. And the thing is, on paper this tame doesn't seem very difficult. You just get some rock drake eggs, or whatever the equivalent kind of special eggs you could say you can find on each map, like rock drake eggs, managama egg, magmasaur egg, sorry, and any kind of wyvern egg. They will all work. So, you know, you've got to spend quite a lot of effort getting those, and then you've got to feed them to this thing without it aggroing onto you. And also there are just a lot of creatures around on Operation, which will probably be the map where you're taming this thing. So again, it's more of a matter of a lot of things can go wrong along the way. In at number 7, we have the Rock Golem, and this thing, it kind of had to be here, and I'm going to put the Titanosaur in the same spot as well, as their head is pretty much the same size when you think about it. Like, pretty similar sized target. And, you know, although they both have their own challenges, the Rock Golem, in my opinion, is the more useful and widely used one, which is why I put it here instead of the Titanosaur. And although maybe that doesn't give the biggest factor to what these creatures actually being on the list means, still a more widely used, well-known creature. I know the Titanosaur is pretty well known, but it's not very widely used. It's gonna relate more to people, you could say. But the Titanosaur in this thing, I'm gonna put pretty much on the same par. You've got to use cannons. You can use rocket launchers as well, but they can be pretty jank, and you know, you can quite easily kill these things, but maybe not quite as jank as the cannon. If you could move the cannon like you could move cannons in Sea of Thieves, this probably wouldn't be that bad. But the cannon moving system in Ark is just, it's awful, frankly, and it makes these tames absolutely miserable. Next up, we have the Astrocetus, and the reason why I'm gonna putting this thing above the Rock Golem is you've got even more dimensions to worry about now. You've kind of got a 3D space rather than a 2D space, as you're not just working on flat ground anymore. You're working in the air, and you know, although you have a much bigger target to hit, these things move a lot more, and they have a lot more area to move around. And yeah, although you can kind of use the hover skiff, and you could say in some cases, if it goes really well, it isn't too bad. I would still say it is harder in pretty much all cases, apart from the Titanosaur and the Rock Golem. Not apart from, because then that would mean they would be further up on the list, and they're not. So that's why these creatures are here. Let's continue on with the list. Next up, we have got the Shadow Mane, and this thing had to be here, okay? When you look at this creature, and you look at how it's tamed, and you look at just the sheer amount of steps, and also how many times this tame can go wrong, and all the different variables in it, it makes sense why this creature is on the list. Like, so many things can go wrong. Obviously, you need those really big fish, and getting those fish in itself will take quite a bit of time. And obviously, maybe that's not the most difficult thing, but it definitely actually can be. And you shouldn't really underestimate catching fish in a fish trap, because it's not the easiest thing to do in the game. And, you know, you might underestimate that. But also, these things can wake up when you're creeping up behind them, and these things can just go out and just attack other creatures in the area. And it's really great. That's why building a trap is kind of the best thing you can do. But they also do come in packs as well, so be wary of that. But once tamed, you've got to use yourself an absolute beast of a creature, which is capable on pretty much any terrain. Like, it's great in the water, great in the air somehow, because it's like really great at doing mobility things, and it's great on the land, and it's great for bosses, and it's great at doing damage, and it has a hydration buff like the Spino. Really great tame. In at number 3, we have the Reaper, and in my opinion, this had to make the list. Like, you look at this creature, right, and you look at its tame method, and even on paper, it seems extremely difficult to do. Like, you have to literally almost kill a Reaper Queen to get it to a low enough amount of health, and then get impregnated by it and carry that baby and get loads of XP to get 100% effectiveness. Like, it really does seem like a huge amount of effort, and a huge effort is, especially considering the biome these things spawn in on Arboration. On Gen 2, they're an absolute cheese, but I'm not really going to count that too much into this, because I kind of want to account where they originally are. But this would have been in the number 2 spot if it actually wasn't for that Gen 2 thing, because I do kind of still have to slightly take that into account, although I admit they are very difficult tames. But obviously you're not going to regret taming one, and you feel so elated once actually you've tamed one, because it feels like you've really achieved something, and you've gone through all these steps, and you've finally now got that end product, and you're pretty much invincible, to be honest. And it's really nice to see your kind of progression as you get this absolutely insane beast of a creature, which most people actually probably underestimate the amount of effort you actually have to put in to get one of these things. In at number 2, we have got the Ratha, and this pretty much follows the same tame method as the Reaper, except you need a load of resources instead of XP to get 100% effectiveness, and it impregnates. I don't know where impregs came from. That's a really weird like slogan of a nickname that happens, I guess, in my mind, but that's a thing now. Impregs, guess I should add that to the Oxford Dictionary. But either way, when you think of this creature, it's practically the same thing, just there are a couple of extra things which make it slightly more irritating, and you need a dino on top of it as well. But getting a dino at the stage of when taming this creature, like a Bronto, the Bronto's like my recommended one, it's not really that difficult, but all the resources required for 100% effectiveness is particularly difficult, and I prefer the XP system of using XP, but, you know, I guess Wildcard had to try something new and different, and it kind of works, so I'm just going to go along with it. I'm not really going to change it. And actually, I think they spawn a bit too often on ASA. I think they should change the spawning rates. But what do you think of the spawning rates on ASA if you've experienced it? I think they're maybe a little bit too scarce on the original Ark, and they're just, there's far too many of them on ASA. At least, in my opinion, like the swamp biome is considerably more dangerous now. But also, before we get into the number 1 spot, I really do have to talk about a couple of creatures which I didn't put on the list, but I still think are very difficult to tame, and you shouldn't underestimate taming one. And the first one I want to talk about is the Noglin. It's a little Noglin. Doesn't really seem very difficult. Well, actually, the first time I did it, it wasn't all too bad, but the fact that you have to like feed it your own creatures, again, it's more of a lot of things can go wrong, and you really shouldn't underestimate that little devil, as I'm going to call it. And also, again, any kind of tame that requires eggs, like the wyverns or the rock drake or the magmasaurs, they're going to be difficult tames. The ferox can be an absolute pain on Gen 1, which most people actually don't talk about, but trust me, it really is a huge irritator to get. And also, quite a few underwater creatures can be pretty irritating. The electric eel was one, but I'm not really going to talk too much about it because it's not a creature worth taming, but it is actually considerably quite difficult to tame because those things are absolute pests. But let's get into number 1. And in at number 1, we have the Aragosaurus, but also I do want to talk about another creature as well, which is the Fenrir, which you can only get by killing a really difficult boss on Fjordur. And technically you could say that's the most difficult Ark Tame, but I'm kind of going to talk about the Armaga more because it's more conventional, but the Fenrir is like the hardest Ark Tame. I'm just going to give it a quick mention there. I don't even think it deserves to be in the honorable mentions. It is really out there. But with the Armaga's absolutely horrible tame method, with this thing having to like hunt for you, there are so, like, everything can go wrong with this creature in terms of its tame method, and it took Raasclark over 24 hours to tame one, and in my opinion he's quite a considerably good Ark player. And although I haven't really spent much time with a tamed one because, you know, I've only tamed one and it was absolute hell, I don't really think they're worth a tame. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I really hope that you all enjoyed this one. And as always, comment down below, what is the most difficult to tame Ark creature? Is it the Fenrir? Is it not? And also, do you agree with this list? If not, comment down your top 10, and I'll see you all later.